Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, a Pittsburgh Steelers podcast made by fans like you, for fans like you. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about 7 deals the Steelers won't make during the 2016 offseason. And if you've been listening to us recently, following any of our social media posts, blog posts on our website over at steelcityunderground.com, you'll see that we have been following more of the free agent side of things at this point, because I just don't like to get into like a rookie class. I don't like to get into the draft. I think it's just silly. We have all these mock drafts, and the NFL draft isn't going to be until May. I mean, the combine isn't still for several weeks. We really don't know who's going to jump up the charts, who's going to fall down the charts. I mean, when you look at something like last season, you look at Lyle Collins. He was supposed to be one of the top offensive linemen drafted. He didn't even end up getting drafted because of some off-the-field issues that they ended up cropping up about a week before the draft. Everybody, got cold feet, and they walked away from it. And we saw that happen with Randy Gregory also, and Randy Gregory was linked with being one of the guys that the Steelers were going to take. He was going to be, the great edge rusher. He had a good college career out of Nebraska, but fell down the draft boards, went in the second round to the Dallas Cowboys, who, the Cowboys, let's just face it, Jerry Jones has his own little world going on down there, and he's going to take troubled players and try and make that work. Has his own way of doing it, a little bit different than like maybe somebody might agree, like people probably agree with the way Bill Belichick handles players in New England. He's able to make them fit the culture. Well, I don't know. The culture down in Dallas, and it's just, let's just be happy that we're Pittsburgh Steelers fans, and let's get back to talking about the black and gold. So, of the 7 deals, I talked about quite a bit the deals the Steelers would be making the last time you guys visited us. So this time, the deals the Steelers won't be making, very similar. We're going to cover the backup quarterback situation once again. And one of the names that popped up was Chase Daniel. And I talked to him ad nauseum. I talked about Chase Daniel in my last podcast. And I was saying, the Kansas City Chiefs, this is their backup. This is a guy that they're probably going to allow to hit free agency. And there's going to be teams out there that have a ridiculous amount of money to spend. They're going to be looking at, you're going to be looking at like a Cleveland Browns, for example. They have a number 2 pick in the draft. They're probably going to blow it again on another quarterback that's not going to pan out. They just don't have the cast around them. And, they could afford to pay somebody like Chase Daniel and say, hey, you know what, Chase Daniel, if you want to come here, and Chase Daniel doesn't know what the situation is yet. It's not May. We haven't gotten into the draft, just like I'm saying. So right now it looks like he would be competing against practically no one because, that team, they're always fishing for someone. They're paying Josh McCown. They picked up Austin Davis, who, by the way, I actually liked how Austin Davis played last year, and I think he would be somebody that the Steelers, I don't know, I'd like to have him on my roster, but it's just somebody that when you're getting with the Cleveland Browns and they have a constant turnover on their roster, they have an allowance. They have a lot of money that the Steelers don't have to spend because the Steelers are constantly filling their roster with quality draft picks, and they're getting more bang for their buck for some of the not so high-priced free agents that are out there. So they're going to the Steelers are bringing in guys like an Arthur Moats, for example, somebody that can play any of the linebacking positions. They're getting the most bang for their buck that they can when they dip their toes in the free agency. So I don't expect the Steelers to be in competition for a player like Chase Daniel. They could surprise me. I do think they're going to be looking to sign a backup quarterback, but I think it's going to be one of the guys we already have. And one of those guys is one of the deals I don't think they're going to make. And as I talked before, it's going to be Michael Vick. Michael Vick is not coming back to the Pittsburgh Steelers, okay? Yes, he could run with the football, but, I mean, you got a problem when Landry Jones beats you for the backup position. Landry Jones jumps up the depth chart, and he takes your spot as the backup, and you become an inactive quarterback. I mean, that just... I'm sorry, folks. They're not going to spend the money on Michael Vick. Landry Jones is already under contract for one more season. They're going to ride the wave with him before they decide what to do with Landry come next year. I think Landry will also have somebody to compete against. They'll bring in... They're not going to draft a quarterback. I don't see them drafting a quarterback. They don't have those picks in the 5th and 6th round that they gave away to the Eagles and gave away to the Jacksonville Jaguars as conditional picks for Brandon Boykin and Josh Scobie. Therefore, they don't have the luxury of taking on a player like a Landry Jones several years ago, saying, hey, you know what, I want to take a look at this kid from Oklahoma who put up some insane college statistics. So, I'm sorry, Landry Jones is in, Michael Vick is out, Chase Daniel's not going to happen, Bruce Gradkowski will probably be back, like I said, in the deals that we need to make. So, that leads me to why we aren't going to draft a quarterback is because we don't have the extra picks to burn. And while we may take an undrafted free agent or just somebody that's been sitting around trying to battle in camp for the last season or two, somebody like a Taj Boyd or like a Brandon Kay, who, you know, they're decent collegiate quarterbacks, but they're just not hanging around on rosters. And you even saw Taj Boyd barely even made it. He didn't even make it onto the field during the preseason last year. And you look at like Tyler Murphy, and Tyler Murphy was a college quarterback, but they wanted to make him a project as a wide receiver. So the Steelers, they're not going to burn any of their draft picks. They're just too valuable, especially this season when you're down 2 of them. They're not going to burn those picks on a backup quarterback. And the reason they're down one of those picks is another guy I don't expect to be back on the roster for next season, and that is Brandon Boykin, who the Steelers traded a conditional pick to the Philadelphia Eagles for. Brandon Boykin came in as one of the highly touted nickel cornerbacks in the NFL. And that was just coming into the Eagles last year. He had his problems with Chip Kelly, got sent packing from Philadelphia, went across state to Pittsburgh, and then rode the bench for about 3/4 of the season. And everyone kept saying, oh, Brandon Boykin, you know, he's this great talent, great talent, great talent. Talented kid, but I'm not really sure, and I might just be speaking about my own opinion here, but I'm really not sure why Brandon Boykin rode the bench. It might have been that the Steelers didn't want to give a higher draft pick. You know, if the guy logs too much time on the field, it's all into that conditional pick scenario. And I think that had to weigh in on it a little bit. But I also think when you go back and you look at like the playoff games and you look and see when Peyton Manning falls on his butt, gets up and completes a pass, and things of that nature happen, and you watch it, Brandon Boykin's covering that guy. Yeah, he made some good plays, but he also made some equally bad plays. I think he just wasn't maybe comfortable with the defense. It could be that he was in a similar situation like Mike Mitchell was a year earlier, and he just needs to ride it out and, you know, work out all the bugs and get comfortable. But I think Brandon Boykin is going to command too much money that the Steelers are willing to be comfortable with spending, especially when they have other free agents that they've got to lock up, as I covered before in my last podcast. You got to be looking ahead to the future with David DeCastro, Le'Veon Bell. They're going to probably want to make Antonio Brown a lifetime Steeler. They're going to be dealing with players of that nature. You're going to be dealing with re-signing William Gay. You got to look at the 2 of our offensive linemen, and Kelvin Beachum and Ramon Foster, and see if you're going to bring one or both, or maybe you don't bring either of those guys back. And I just think that Brandon Boykin, signing him to a contract is too much of a luxury that may actually detrimentally hurt this salary cap should they do it. I also feel that the coaching staff, not only not being comfortable with Brandon Boykin, if they felt there's something wrong with Brandon Boykin, and there's a specific reason why he wasn't on the field, if it was something on the field, something where Boykin didn't know the playbook, let's say, and I'm not saying that he did or didn't, but if that's like something that's a knock on this guy, you have a player that's a very similar size, very very similar maybe talent or upside in last year's 2nd round draft pick Senquez Golson, who's going to come back from the injured reserve, and I just think that's just another knock or another strike against Brandon Boykin returning to the Pittsburgh Steelers for 2016. I also want to talk about, and this is kind of an odd one, is Shaun Suisham. Okay, I love Shaun Suisham, big fan of Shaun Suisham. My wife's not even a Steelers fan, and she loves Shaun Suisham, and he's a great kicker. But you got to look, the guy's, you know, he's north of 30. He's coming back from a very bad knee injury, and I just think the big contract they gave him last year, when you go through and you get to your 4th kicker and you have Chris Boswell, and the guy has, like, you know, veins of ice, and he could go out there And it almost appears that Boswell can put the ball in the back of the end zone, kick longer, is just as accurate. And you know what? Being a first-year player, kind of slash rookie, makes him a lot more affordable to where the Steelers could shuffle and play shell game with some of this money that they're due to Shaun Suisham, that they owe Shaun Suisham under his current contract. And they could play a shell game and move that money over into one of their other positions. Some of the other guys I said, like a DeCastro that they're looking to extend, they'll probably give maybe a bonus after they give him a fifth-year option since he was a first-round pick. So Shaun Suisham, the reason he's on this list as being a no deal is that I don't foresee any team wanting, and I got a joke because I think someone was just trolling me on Twitter or Facebook saying that we need to trade Shaun Suisham for like a Josh Norman, one of the top corners in the league out of the Carolina Panthers. And it's just like nobody's trading a corner for a kicker. The most you're going to get for a kicker is maybe another draft pick, and we're probably not going to get that draft pick until it's the 2017 draft. People are going to want to see, and I think the Steelers are going to want to see. They're going to want to see, can Boswell, can he avoid a sophomore slump? They're going to put him into a battle of which Suisham, see, this is the thing that happened. Suisham usually never had any camp competition because he was such a good kicker, but almost every team brings in another kicker for camp and just to have that competition and that what if. And unfortunately, it come back and bit the Steelers in the butt this year. And they went through Garrett Hartley and then, of course, Josh Scobie and burning a draft pick on him. So I think some teams are going to be cautious. The Steelers are going to want to see what Suisham can do. They want to see if he's healed, if he could still be the same player that he was. And once the Steelers know that, the other 31 teams in the NFL will know that too, and maybe the offers will come rolling. So this is one of those deals where I say no with an asterisk, meaning the asterisk is probably going to be somewhere between like the second and fourth preseason game. If they don't get a deal done, I expect Suisham to probably get the axe. They're not going to keep him for the 53-man cuts. I just don't see it. I think they're going to just try and hold on to him for as long as possible until they can find a suitable trade partner and get something out of the equity that they have in Shaun Suisham. So I know it's not very exciting. We're talking about backup quarterbacks. We're talking about nickel corners. So let's talk about the high-profile name that keeps getting floated around. One of the biggest names of free agency that's coming up here in March is Eric Weddle, a safety from the San Diego Chargers. And it almost, it makes me boil to think of, you have fans out there that think we don't have a salary cap. And they think we have more money to spend than what the Steelers actually do have to spend. And when you start thinking like that, you may as well think that, hey, you know what? This could be like the New York Yankees from years ago, and they can just buy every great player to put, and they can make an all-star team. They can make a dream team, and it's just not how the NFL works. I mean, you're going to look at the Denver Broncos. They have a bunch of guys that are probably average guys who just won a Super Bowl that are going to get huge contracts. You see it every year. We saw it happen with the Baltimore Ravens. You got somebody like Paul Kruger going and making an insane amount of money with the Cleveland Browns. And just all these guys become way more high profile. Eric Weddle's not in that Super Bowl category. It's something that he wants, and it's something that it's rumored that he's willing to take a pay cut to get. But just how much of a pay cut? You do have teams out there that have an insane amount of money to spend. You have the Cincinnati Bengals, for example, in our own division, that they're going to lose Reggie Nelson. He's going to go into free agency. So the Bengals are going to be looking at themselves as, do we want to spend the money on Reggie Nelson, or we might spend the money on Eric Weddle? And if they decide to go after and pursue Eric Weddle at the same time the Steelers are pursuing him, they can offer him more money. And they are arguably, having been in the playoffs for the last 4 or 5 years, having won the AFC North a couple times, they're arguably a contender that Eric Weddle will say, yes, I will make more money and go to Cincinnati rather than go to Pittsburgh. It can happen, folks. I kind of want to downplay all the excitement around Eric Weddle because you know what? I think he's a great player. And while he's maybe a little bit north of 30 himself, I think he's just turning 31, just turned 31 last month. And, he's going to hit free agency. He's a Pro Bowl safety. Everyone's got their emotional feelings over needing a replacement for Troy Polamalu. I think Eric Weddle would be a fantastic fit for the Pittsburgh Steelers, for what this team does, for how this team schemes. He'd be a huge upgrade at the safety position. I just don't know that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to be willing to spend the money and take the sacrifice and put themselves in a hole where they can lose out on one of their other marquee players to get a guy who's just a little bit north of 30. He's going to be heading probably into the last maybe 3-4 years of his career. How much can you get out of Eric Weddle, and how much is that worth to you versus maybe investing a first or second round draft pick and maybe another project at working someone in the safety, bringing back another one of our veterans that we've had like a Will Allen, or even a guy who's shown actually more promise than Shamarko Thomas, who was the would-be success for the number 43. Somebody like a Robert Golden, who's been nothing but a special team standout, gets a little bit of a chance to play. Not perfect, not this super player, but just good enough to fill that gap, because you need some guys that are just going to be average in the cost. Maybe they overachieve, and you just never know. It could be one of those magic seasons where somebody like Robert Golden, who is significantly cheaper than Eric Weddle, could go out there, could get some sacks, could get some turnovers, could make some big plays, and that's all the more this team might need to turn the corner and make a run for their 7th Super Bowl win.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.